Waha.
I don't like that.
No? In spirit of the season in the comic. Christmas season, right?
Oh my... I'm not gonna do this.
It's Christmas season, but
Stop.
Halloween's coming up. So, in the spirit of Halloween, who am I dressed as?
Jason Voorhees.
Correct, but today incorrect. I'm dressed as Harry, the Maniac of New York.
The Maniac.
Mm-hmm. So, that's the comic we're talking about today. I'm taking off. I was dressed as Jason there in my $10 kids costume from how many years ago, right? So, Maniac of New York is the comic talking about today. It is published by Aftershock Comics, who I had never heard of.
I've never heard of them.
Right, they're a new-ish American comic book company. They were founded in 2015. I was kind of scrolling through their titles and I didn't really recognize anything. So, kind of a newer publisher, but they came out with this. So this was published, it's a 5-issue. I thought it was just a mini-series. I thought it was just going to be 5 issues. We'll get to that later, but there's going to be more of it. It was released in, let me take you back to 2021, the current year we're in, but February. February is when it started. So February, March, April, May, June.
New.
Yes, new from this year. The trade, which you're holding, just came out. Like, I ordered it, like, on Amazon, where it was, like, the earliest it can be delivered, have it delivered. So, I don't know if they planned it out so the trade would come out around Halloween, but there you go. So, yeah. This was, I heard of it from shout out Mr. Sunday Movies. He talked about it, and I was like, that sounds interesting. So, I read it, and we'll talk about how much I enjoyed it, but it was written by Elliott Kalan. I don't know if that name sounds familiar to you at all.
Nope.
He's a 4-time Emmy winner.
Really?
He was a writer. Let me take you back to 2006. He was a writer for The Daily Show.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting that.
I know, right? So, he worked on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and actually when Jon Stewart hosted the Academy Awards, which was 2008 for the awards, 2007 films, he wrote the, I don't know if I call it infamous, but the gay cowboy skit for Jon Stewart, because he hosted the Oscars. I don't know if that skit sounds familiar to you. So that was when Brokeback Mountain came out.
Yeah.
And Jon Stewart did this thing of like, oh, people are outraged that there's gay cowboys. That's never happened before. And then he had this montage of just clips from all these Western films where it's like people licking their lips or two guys getting really close to each other. Like, you know what I mean? So apparently this guy, Elliott, was responsible for that skit.
That's
so
funny.
Oh, here, you'd enjoy this. He was on an episode, Elliott Kalan was on an episode of Jeopardy!
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he did not win. He got second place. I don't know the dollar amount, but he was on Jeopardy! And you've been on your Jeopardy!
I've been on Jeopardy kick lately.
Yeah, so thought you'd like that. Interesting guy, though. He's a comedian, does stand-up. Then he got into comic book writing. He wrote Spider-Man for a little bit. He's actually responsible for a fairly famous, infamous meme for Spider-Man, where Spider-Man is talking to one of his villains who's like a pterodactyl, like a dinosaur, but in modern day.
Yeah.
And this villain can rewrite DNA, and that's why he can turn himself into a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man goes, you can rewrite DNA on the fly, and you're using it to turn people into dinosaurs, but with tech like that, you could cure cancer. And the villain's response is, I don't want to cure cancer, I want to turn people into dinosaurs. So this guy wrote that.
Yeah. And
it's kind of turned into a meme. I'm sure it's supposed to be funny, but it's one of the more ridiculous lines to come out of Spider-Man, so there you go. So yeah, he does a podcast too called The Flop House. It's kind of a knockoff of, Good, Bad, and the Garbage, I would say, where him and two friends make fun of flop movies.
What's a flop movie?
Like a flop. Like a box office flop.
Oh, okay.
Flop, comma, movie.
I thought it was a style
like a genre,
movie.
a hidden genre of film, the flop. No, movies. So, yeah, bad movies. So that's why it's a ripoff of Good, Bad, Garbage, even though he's probably been doing it longer. So yeah, that's a little backstory on Maniac of New York, which is essentially, like you said, I look like Jason Voorhees. Like, it's Jason Takes Manhattan.
Cool.
Which is a real movie. Like, that's a movie that exists where Jason Voorhees walks around New York and kills people. I mean, that is, on the surface, that's what this is, and it's a horror slasher story. But, he wrote for Daily Show, so there is metaphors and meanings behind it all, which is kind of what makes this worth reading, in my opinion. We can get into what it's about. It starts out in New Year's Eve 2016, and this guy in essentially a Jason Voorhees outfit shows up at Times Square and then proceeds to kill, it's like 79 people, something like that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So it just opens with a bang. 79 people dead in one night. And
on New Year's?
Yes.
Times Square?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
And it's, there's blood in this comic. I wouldn't call it overly graphic because of the art style. It doesn't make it...
Very, like, watercolor.
Yeah. Like, I like it. I think it fits the tone of the comic book pretty well. But it is different, which is kind of cool. The drawings aren't crazy, but yeah, the coloring is water style, like you were saying. So, first night, that's the first sighting. Kills 79 people, including a couple cops. So... the city holds a visual. Oh, we're sad. We're never going to let this happen. And then, boom, it's like Endgame. 4 years later, it just jumps ahead in time. And the first thing we see is the news is like, oh, here's where Harry, the killer, is located. Don't go in that area. So we find out that society is pretty much, not society, but the city of New York has just decided we're gonna deal with it. Like, we can't kill him. We've tried killing him. He can't die. So we're just gonna let him be a thing, and we're gonna try to go around him when we can. So, killings are a pretty normal thing.
Ooh, decapitation.
Yeah, decapitation.
Frame?
Decapitations happen a lot in this. But yeah, so society is basically like, this is just a normal part of our lives now. So I don't know if that's supposed to be a take on maybe like shootings or school shootings, things like that, but that's the feel or vibe I got from it. And then we get introduced to Gina, this blonde lady who you meet her. She's at her apartment getting coffee ready. There's this picture of this young man. We don't know who it is yet, but she is the newly appointed director or leader of the Harry task force. So she's in charge of getting rid of Harry.
Okay.
And she shows up at the police department, and she's the very stereotypical wide-eyed, I'm going to do great at this job person. Mm-hmm. So she's like, okay, here's my task force. How many men do I have? When am I meeting with the mayor to go over my plan? When is this happening? Blah, 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 blah. And they just laugh at her. And they're like, no, here's your little desk in the corner. And it's just you, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The budget's been slashed, pun intended, for years and years. This is all you got. And then she's like, all right, guess this will have to do. And she hangs up that same picture of this young man that she had at her apartment on a bulletin board. Mm-hmm. So that's Gina. Then we get introduced to Zelda, who is like an on-the-streets cop. And she is the only other member of this task force where she's the cop who investigates the Harry killings. So if they think a murder was done by Harry, then she gets called in, and then she investigates it. Yeah. And we get introduced to her. She's on a crime scene with these 3 other cops, and they're like, "Oh, well, here's another one for your file." Yeah. And she's like, "This person was shot in the head, point blank."
And Harry always uses this like knife thing or whatever.
Yeah. She's like, he's an axe-wielding maniac. I don't think
He's not using a gun to shoot people.
Yeah, so basically we're introduced to, like, cops in New York are they're just lazy now, and if there's ever a murder that they just don't want to deal with.
They want to blame it on Harry.
Yeah, they're like, here, you take care of this. I don't want to deal with it.
We couldn't have prevented this. We're just letting Harry do his thing.
Yeah, like, we don't want to do the work on this investigation, so you just take this. Okay. So, that's Zelda. She's a very jaded person. Like, these 3 cops call her a snitch. And then she, punches them, calls them a motherfucker, blah, blah, blah. So she's got a past where, she's in this role for a reason. Mm-hmm. And they keep calling her a snitch. So something has happened to her in her past. So then Zelda and Gina meet, and it's just very clear, idealistic person, jaded person. So initially they just don't really get along. One really wants to do all these things, and the other one's like, just give up. So that's just kind of the give and take for the 2 of them initially. And then on the news they hear that there's a Harry sighting. So Gina just comes storming into the police department like, oh, I need, she's full of the vocabulary that a stereotypical person would have, where when she hears there's a sighting, she's like, I need to commandeer a vehicle. And Zelda's like, okay, commandeer, let's calm down. And she storms into the police department, like, code red, and everyone just starts laughing at her, like, okay, calm down, lady. Like, let's just pump the brakes a little. This was a fake sighting. Let's just calm down. And Zelda and her start talking a little bit more. Zelda asks, who's this kid? This photo we've seen a couple times. Who is this guy? And she goes, that's Josh Rosenberg. He's the Maniac's first victim. And Zelda's like, no. I know all of the victims the Maniac that Harry has ever had. He's never killed anyone called Josh Rosenberg. Like, his first victim was this person at Times Square. And Gina's like, no, the very first sighting of him was at this camp. And I was there. And this was my boyfriend. And I was there when he got killed. So she saw Harry before he was called Harry. Like, the true first sighting of him. Gotcha. She was there, and that's what kind of led her down this path. And then we get introduced to the subway system in New York right now, and there's this new automated train going on where there's like no workers, just fully automated, and we get introduced to Gabriella, who is just a normal New Yorker sitting on this train, thinking in her head about how her life kind of stinks because she lives in like the Harry kill zone, but her rent is still too expensive, and then the first issue ends with Harry showing up on the train. And then the second issue is a mixture of Harry on this train just massacring people.
Yeah.
And then, which is probably where that decapitation came in for you.
Mm-hmm.
But then, while that's going on, Gina and Zelda meet with this guy. His name is Gardner Burnham, or Birnbaum. He wrote a book after the New Year's Eve. Yeah, that's him, that old guy. So he wrote a book after the Times Square killings that didn't paint the police or mayoral office in a good light. Mm-hmm. And so, like, he got, I don't know about sued, but like people don't like him because, or the police department doesn't like him because he like didn't paint them in a good light. But it was a best-selling book, and it had a lot of information about Harry in it, so that's why Zelda and Gina are talking to him. And basically, while they're talking to him, he lets loose of some nuggets of information like, oh, did you know that the only thing that can stop Harry is fire?
Whoa.
And they're like, what? And he's like, yeah, no, there was an incident with the police department years ago where he was in a burning building. People saw him screaming, Harry screaming, which never happens. But he got away. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, why don't other people know about this? They're like, well, the police didn't want the public to know that they let Harry slip through their fingers, so they didn't make it public. It's just going to the idea of like people suck. Like, well, maybe we should let this be public so that people could fight him. But no, we just don't want ourselves to look bad. Yep. So no, we're not going to make that public.
Yeah.
And then they ask him, like, well, how come you haven't made it public? And he goes, well, I need info for my second book. So this guy sucks too, but he knows things.
Naturally.
Yep. So after they're done meeting with him, they get the call that there's an attack on the train system. They run to their office. They meet with the mayor, and the mayor's pissed off because he's like, it isn't just on a train, it's on my train. So he's the one who came up with the idea of an automated train and pushed for it, and it's like his baby of a project.
Did the automated train have anything to do with Harry, or this is like...
It's kind of coincidental.
Okay.
Like, he just, I think, stumbled.
I didn't know if it was something like, oh, if we have an automated train, maybe it'll prevent Harry from doing X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like they're necessarily tied
Not
together.
that they explain this. Maybe it's like, oh, less workers, so less people in danger. I don't know. These people mainly suck, so I don't know if that's anything in it. I think maybe it's a money-saving thing. Like, we don't have to pay these people, probably.
Right.
So they're on, it's like his baby of a project. So he's upset that his train is gonna look bad, basically. He doesn't really care that people are dying. He's more like, why does this have to happen on this train? Because it's, my baby and I don't want it to look bad. Gina right away is like, we're gonna help these people on the train, right? And the mayor's like, well, we kind of have them stuck on this train. So we could just keep the doors closed and let the train keep running. Then we have Harry cornered and we could try to figure something out. And Gina's like, but there are people on the train. He's like, they're dead already. Like, they're all dead. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
And then we flash back to the train, and Gabrielle is basically the only one left alive, and she runs into two kids, a boy and a girl. I think they're brother and sister. And their names are Lena and Jonah. So she starts helping them out. So they're basically, essentially, the only three survivors on this train still. And then Gina and Zelda, they have a little argument about should we go help, should we not. They essentially decide to jump on this train and try to save anyone anyways, right? They're trying to do the right thing. So they decide to figure out where the train is, hop on it, and try to help out anyone who's there.
How old are these kids on the train, you think?
Like 10 and 8, maybe? Something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I would say. That's my best guess. I don't know. That's the girl right there. Little girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they're crying. They're not teenagers or anything. They're very upset with what's going on and kind of hysterical. So they do end up hopping on the train. And then there's this scene where Gabrielle she trips and falls. She tells the kids to keep running, but Harry's right behind her. She trips and falls, and then right as soon as Harry goes to kill her, the PA, so it's not an automated train, so there's an automated PA system, announces, this station is 81st Street, Museum of Natural History. And then Harry freezes. He doesn't kill her. He just doesn't move. He stops moving.
Weird.
And then Gabrielle gets up and runs away with the kids, and the kids are like, why isn't he moving? She's like, I don't care, let's get out of here. We just need to get out of here. Run, 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 run.
Yeah.
Eventually, they meet up with Zelda and Gina. Zelda's starting to rub off on Gina a little bit. Like, she's, starting to carry it. Like, Zelda, who is the cop who was a snitch, she carries a flask around with her all the time. And Gina's starting to be like, give me a little bit of that. Like, all right, I need, so this job does suck. I want to do it, but it does kind of suck. Give me your flask. So, they're starting to rub off on each other a little bit. Zelda's starting to do the right thing a little bit more. Gina's starting to, I don't know if it's good or bad, but starting to loosen up and get a little more, I don't know, gritty or hard on the job a little bit. But anyways, they run into each other. They show Harry, he basically just sits down in a seat. Like, he was just standing over Gabrielle. He's just sitting in a seat. And then the PA system goes, this station is 96th Street. Thank you for riding the New York's first automated train. And then he gets up and starts hunting them down.
What is that all about? That's crazy.
Yep. So that they do reveal what it's about a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
But so they all get together. Gabriella does end up getting killed by Harry. So the kids escape or make it because they escape the situation because Gina, who's got the flask on her now, she lights either a cigarette or a match or something and then spits the alcohol on the fire and then onto Harry to set him on fire. So she essentially sets him on fire and then he runs away, in the subway tunnel screaming for his life. But they escape. So Gina, Zelda, the kids survive. This is her doing the flame on Harry. That's kind of a cool panel.
Yeah.
But then they're in the mayor's office, and he's pissed off because they didn't follow orders, right? Like, they went and saved people when he said not to. Mayor's pissed off, but he can't do anything about it. Because they're like, okay, well, here's our badges. And he's like, what, you think I'm going to fire the people that saved 2 kids? I'm not a fucking idiot, but I'm pissed at you guys. And then Gina basically decides to take the fall she takes full responsibility. She does a whole press conference about how I take full responsibility for the train. Everything was my decision, blah, blah, blah. So she basically lets the mayor off the hook. And then issue 4 actually ends with these 2 people at the Natural Museum of History going, oh yeah, I love this section. This is like, no one ever comes back here, blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is a 15th century amulet, and the amulet is basically the mask that Harry wears.
Ooh, okay.
So this amulet, which is in the museum, which was the stop that was announced when Harry stopped moving, they're connected somehow.
All right.
And then, so then the 5th issue, which is the last issue in this initial run at least, basically it opens with Lena, the little girl from the train, having nightmares about Harry. Makes sense. She's now living with her grandma or something like that, who basically all she does is, it's like your typical like Fox News person, no offense out there, I guess, but I guess some offense, who just, they sit in front of the TV listening to the news and complain about shit. So she's listening to people bash Gina and blaming her for all these people dying on the train, even though it wasn't her fault, but she took the fall for it, but no one knows that. And the grandma's sitting there going, oh, this woman sucks, blah, blah, blah. And then Lena's like, no, she saved me. And she's like, you don't know what you're talking about. She sucks as a person. And then, so Gina's getting ridiculed. There's people protesting her, people spitting in her face because they had kids on this train or family members on this train who died. So everyone's blaming her. She eventually gets a call from Gardner, that old guy from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. The book, the
author. Yep, exactly. And basically, he calls her and is like, why'd you take the blame for this? Just kind of a quick conversation about what he wants to know what happened on the train. And then it's revealed, like, he was just looking for information for his book, and he wants to call his next book The Death Train. Which is what the volume is. The trade back that you have in your hand is called The Death Train.
Ooh, yes, it is.
Oddly enough. Basically, this run ends with Lena realizing what happened. She's been having nightmares about Harry, and she's been having flashbacks to when he froze. And she's basically like, why did he freeze? Why did he freeze? And then she realizes where they were. She remembers what the PA said. Like the stop.
Yeah. So
she goes to call. She's trying to call Gina. She's trying to tell Gina where to look. Or like go here because Harry stopped attacking us when we were here. And when she calls, she can't get a hold of her. And then her grandma shows up and hangs up the phone and is like, stop calling people. What are you doing? And then the issue ends with this newscaster who's, shitty person who is like, oh, the government's been trying to get rid of him for 3 years. Maybe we need to start wondering if the Harry's working for the government. Whatever.
Yeah.
And then, when he's like, okay, good day at work, blah, blah, blah. He leaves through an alley, and there's this homeless guy in the alley who's like, hey, can you spare some change? And this guy's a total dick to him. He goes, no, I don't, get out of here, blah, blah, blah. And then
where's the maniac when you need him?
Exactly.
The newscaster says.
Right, like, just like, oh, this guy needs to die. Even though he's a person, he's a homeless guy. Like, why are we treating people this shitty? And then the maniac shows up, kills the homeless guy. It's revealed he's still alive from that fire attack from Gina. And then he just kind of walks into a busy street in New York.
Oh, yeah.
Still alive, still looking to kill people. And then that's how it ends. So, initially, when I thought this was just a 5-issue miniseries, I was like, oh, I don't want it to end like that.
Yeah.
Like, we know that the amulet's connected to him. I'm like a completist. I like a this is an ending. Like, I'm not as, I like some open-ended ways for things to end, but not always. But this was very much like, oh, I want more. So when I found out they're making another series, which comes out in December of 2021, I was pretty happy. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. Like, a lot of it's copied from, like I said, Jason Takes Manhattan. Like, it's basically Jason Voorhees. But it's a fun read. Like, it isn't that hard to read either. And, the metaphors are behind it all, like society kind of just accepting shitty things and not doing anything about it, which everyone could agree is something that happens in real life.
Yeah.
Which, when you realize that the writer's from The Daily Show, like a very comical, like political satire, like it makes sense that he would write this.
Yeah.
So overall, I thought it was pretty good. If anything, I wish the world was bigger. Like 2.5 of the issues take place on the train, and like there's more in New York that you could probably get to. But apparently in the next series or volume or whatever it's called, The Bronx is Burning, apparently in an interview Elliott said that he plans on like expanding into more of New York.
Yeah. Which
is what I would have liked in this, but it's nice to see that he's gonna do that eventually. And he also said, we'll also see Gina and Zelda's relationship develop further as Gina becomes more coldly obsessed with stopping the maniac, pushing Zelda away, and Lena, that girl who like remembered the thing, will return on a quest of her own. So I kind of like that'll continue, and I'm hoping it'll eventually get to that amulet. Like they figure it out.
Yeah, because I would say that's the interesting part. Like, where did this guy come from, and why does he behave like this? And
it's like if
what makes him so sinister that it's easier to just let him do his thing.
Yeah, like, is he a person who got the amulet, or is he literally a spirit? You know what I mean? Like, is he Bob Smith, a camp, a counselor at that camp who wandered and found the amulet, and now, if you break the curse, is he a human again? Or is he literally a walking being like Jason Voorhees, where you need to, like, just kill him or break the amulet and then he's gone? But yeah, like, when he's killing people, it's like, okay, you've seen it before. It's, like, the amulet background, the camp background, like, why was that the first place he showed up in?
Do we know how long ago that was? I mean, it's long enough that she was a kid. Yeah. Well, she said that the picture of the guy, like, that was her boyfriend. So I mean, it's not like she's like 5 years old. No, yeah,
I get the feeling. Okay, so yeah, it's the date's on here. So this is August 3rd, 2009.
Oh,
and so he first years.
Shows up 2016.
Yeah, so that's 7 years that he was around or doing something that is unaccounted for. So that's a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's interesting stuff. So,
and it's not like, because in the back of the trade back here, I don't know if it's
is it the map?
But yeah, the map of like
just kind of interesting.
His casualties, and it's not like he kills 2 people and moves on. Some of them are like 23 people. Or what was the very first one, like that New Year's Eve? It was
the comic said 79. This map on the back says 85. So I don't know if they explain the difference there, but yeah.
So it's.
Me, I like maps. I like maps in the back of books. So here's like a murder map here for the maniac.
Yes.
Yeah, you can tell when they start getting used to it because you stop getting the double digit like 20s, and then it's just like a 7, 8, 6, 4, 4, 4. That's when they started figuring it out, I guess, if you can call it figuring it out.
So how public do they make this information? Like, oh hey, here's where the Maniac is.
It's on the news.
Okay.
It's part of their daily lives. Turn on the news.
Of course, I just come back from a trip to Houston, and so it's like, oh, if you're traveling and like you're not up to date on this, like, oh, you might just be gone because you don't know, like,
right.
Either you don't know about the Maniac or you don't know enough about how they track him to like pay attention. Like, oh, I need to pay attention to see where the Maniac is today.
I think so. It's on the news, so I think it's very public. But then it turns into, is it really Harry? Because another thing that the writer said he's going to get into in the next volume is copycat people.
Ooh, ew.
Like people who would dress up like him and get away with murder. Because it's like, oh, it was just Harry. So it's like, is it just a copycat person you're seeing on the street, or is it really Harry? So
I don't like thinking about that. Oh,
right?
Gross.
Like I would like to think not a lot of people are going on vacation in New York in this world, but at the same time, there are so many people still living there.
Yeah.
That that's like the point is, and that's another thing that's kind of interesting in this. So Gardner, the writer, lives in what they call the Harry free zone. So I guess they've mapped out, it must be close to the museum based on what we read in the comic. But apparently they mapped it out, and there's a certain area that Harry just he never goes to. So rent in that area, like, is skyrocketed.
Oh, of course.
Because it's got to make money.
There you go, the haves and have-nots.
Yeah. So he lives in the Harry free zone. Actually, that's not a public... Maybe it is a public... Because they talk to him, like, oh, are you going to put where you live in your next book? And he's like, oh, and make my rent even higher than it already is. So maybe it's a public thing, maybe not, I don't know, but that's like a thing. And Gabriella lived in the Harry kill zone, and she was complaining that rent was still going up, and the landlords are like, well, I would have doubled it if Harry wasn't around, so you're actually getting a deal. It's a whole it's like Kohl's. Kohl's like, oh, you're still spending $100, but you saved $100.
Yes,
so
yes, exactly. Yeah, when you go shopping at Kohl's, you better be saving as much as you spend.
Yeah, exactly. So overall, like, I definitely recommend it. I could, it isn't anything overly crazy creative. Like I said, it's a slasher story. It's basically Jason. It's in New York. There's some symbolism behind it all, but the amulet thing at the end really makes it interesting. So, if they really pick up on that in the next volume, I could see this getting better. And this is just kind of like a soft intro into a bigger, more interesting story.
Yep.
But it's still good. Still, I like how it looks. The art kind of matches the storyline to me, at least. So there's some interesting characters. Some stereotypical characters, but still kind of fun to follow along.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is Maniac in New York from Aftershock Comments, written by Elliott, Kalan, art by, I didn't mention the artist, Andrea Muti, if I'm saying that right. He actually has his own website, the artist does, and this book isn't on his website for some reason. It looks like kind of an older one. Maybe he just hasn't updated it yet, but I thought that was kind of interesting. They're both coming back for the next arc. So,
cool.
Yeah.
That's good to see.
Check it out, your local comic book store, and make sure to subscribe, rate, and review Comics Unlimited, the name of this podcast, which I definitely didn't forget in that moment. But yeah, support us any way you can. Subscribe, rate, and review. Check out other podcasts on this channel, like Bubbler Sports, Oscar Reel Movie Podcasts, and Good, Bad, and Garbage, as I mentioned earlier. Much appreciated, and we'll see you next time.